He cared, I said, and my voice cracked. Maybe not the way he should have. Maybe not enough. But he thought about you. He watched your life from a distance. He wasn't brave enough to be in it. Silence on the line. Then, what was he like? The question surprised me. After everything, the abandonment, the secrets, the pain, she still wanted to know about him. He was complicated, I said honestly. Quiet. Hardworking. He ran a hardware store in Stillwater for almost 40 years. He liked fixing things, cars mostly. He wasn't good at talking about feelings. He kept everything locked up inside. Sounds like he was kind of a coward. I couldn't argue with that. Yeah. He was. But you loved him anyway. I did. Even when I didn't like him very much, I loved him. He was my dad. He was my dad too, Grace said softly. He just chose not to be. The pain in her voice was raw, immediate. And I felt it echo in my own chest, because hadn't I felt abandoned too? In a different way, but still, abandoned by a father who was physically present but emotionally absent. I'd like to meet you, I said. If you're open to it. You and David and me. No parents, no history. Just us. I don't know, Grace said. This is a lot. I know. Take whatever time you need. But Grace? I'm glad I found you. I'm glad you exist. And I'm sorry, so sorry, for everything our father put you through. You don't have to apologize for him. I know. But I am anyway. Another pause. There's a coffee shop in Riverside, Grace finally said. The Riverside Cafe, on Main Street. I could meet you there Saturday morning. 10 a.m. We'll be there. Okay. She sounded nervous. Okay. I'll see you Saturday. Grace? Yeah? Thank you. For being willing to meet us. Don't thank me yet, she said with a hint of dark humor. I might take one look at you and run. After we hung up, I sat there staring at my phone, my heart pounding. Saturday. 3 days away. I was going to meet my sister. Saturday morning dawned gray and drizzly, typical Oregon weather. David and I drove to Riverside together, neither of us saying much. The letters from Dad were in my bag, carefully stored in a folder. I didn't know if Grace would want to see them, but I wanted to have them just in case. Riverside was bigger than Stillwater, a town of about 15,000 people built along the Willamette River. The downtown area was charming in that deliberately quaint way, antique shops, boutiques, restaurants with outdoor seating now empty in the rain. We found the Riverside Cafe easily. It was a cozy spot with big windows and mismatched furniture, the smell of coffee and baked goods filling the air. We were early. We grabbed a table in the corner where we could see the door. I feel like I'm going to throw up, David muttered. Same. What if she hates us? Then she hates us. We can't control that. What if she looks at us and sees everything Dad took from her? David. I grabbed his hand. Whatever happens, we're doing the right thing. Okay? He nodded, but he looked as terrified as I felt. At exactly 10 a.m., the door opened. And Grace walked in. She was wearing jeans and a green sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She stood in the doorway for a moment, scanning the cafe, and when her eyes landed on us, she went very still. I stood up slowly. David did too. For a moment, we just looked at each other. She did look like me. Seeing her in person was even more shocking than seeing her photo. We had the same build, the same way of standing, even the same nervous habit of tucking hair behind our ears. Grace walked over slowly, like she was approaching something dangerous. "Lena," she said. "Yeah." "Hi. This is David." "Hi," David said awkwardly. Grace looked between us, her expression unreadable. Then she laughed, a short, surprised sound. "This is so weird," she said. "I know," I said, and I laughed too, nervous and high-pitched. We all sat down. An awkward silence descended. The waitress came over and we ordered coffee, grateful for the distraction. After she left, the silence came back. "So," Grace finally said. "You're my half-siblings." "Yeah," David said. "Apparently. And you didn't know about me until a week ago." "Not until we read Thomas's letter," I said. "Can I see it?" "The letter?" I pulled it out of my bag and handed it to her. Grace read it silently, her expression shifting: anger, hurt, confusion, sadness. When she finished, she set it down carefully on the table. "He calls me his biggest mistake," she said. "No, he says leaving you was his biggest mistake," I corrected gently. "Same thing." "It's not. Grace, he regretted what he did. He thought about you constantly. He watched your life." "Like a creep," she interrupted. "He watched my life from a distance like some kind of stalker instead of actually being my father." She wasn't wrong. "You're right," I said. "You're absolutely right to be angry." That seemed to take the wind out of her sails. She'd been gearing up for an argument, and I'd agreed with her instead. "I am angry," she said. "I'm furious. My whole life, I wondered about my father. Who he was, why he left, if he ever thought about me. And it turns out he lived 30 miles away the entire time. He could have shown up any day. He could have been part of my life. But he chose not to." "I know. Do you?" Grace's eyes flashed. "Do you really know what that's like? You grew up with a father. Maybe he wasn't perfect, but he was there. You got birthdays and Christmases and someone to teach you to drive. I got nothing." David spoke up quietly. "You're right. We can't understand what that was like. But Lena and I, we grew up with a father who was barely there emotionally. He was physically present but totally absent in every way that mattered. It's different than what you went through, but it hurt too." Grace looked at him, then back at me. "Why did you reach out? What do you want from me?" "Nothing," I said honestly. "We don't want anything. We wanted you to know the truth. We wanted to meet you. To tell you that you have family, if you want it." "Family." She said the word like it was foreign. "I don't know you. You don't know me. We share DNA, but that doesn't make us family." "You're right," I said again. "But it could be a start." The waitress brought our coffee. We all took sips, grateful for something to do with our hands. "My mom is going to freak out when I tell her about this," Grace said finally. "How is she?" "Sarah?" "She's fine. She lives in Portland now, actually. Has for about 5 years. She's a teacher." Grace stirred her coffee. "She never talks about my father. Whenever I asked as a kid, she'd just say he was young and scared and not ready to be a dad. She made it sound like it wasn't personal, like he would have run from any woman who got pregnant." "She was protecting you," I said. "Or protecting him. Maybe both." Grace looked at me thoughtfully. You said there were more letters. In your message, you mentioned dozens of them. Yeah. I pulled out the thick envelope. He wrote to you for years. Never sent any of them. But they're yours, if you want them. She took the envelope with trembling hands, opened it, and pulled out a letter at random. As she read, tears started sliding down her face. He knew about my wedding, she whispered. He knew I married Michael. He was there? Watching? I don't know. Maybe just heard about it through the grapevine. Small town, word gets around. This is so messed up. Grace wiped her eyes angrily. He watched my life like I was a character in a TV show, but he never actually participated. I know. Stop saying that. She looked at me with sudden anger. Stop agreeing with me. Defend him or something. Tell me there was a good reason. There wasn't, I said quietly. There was no good reason. He was selfish and scared and weak. He made terrible choices and a lot of people got hurt because of it. Then why did you want to meet me? Why drag me into this if he was such a piece of shit? Because you're not just connected to him, I said. You're connected to us. And David and I, we've been through our own stuff with Dad. We understand what it's like to be disappointed by him. And I thought maybe we could help each other make sense of it. Grace stared at me, tears still streaming down her face. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. You look so much like me it's disturbing, she said. I know. I thought the same thing when I saw your picture. We have the same nose. And the same weird widow's peak. Same terrible posture too, David added, and we all looked at him. What? You both slouch. It's genetic, apparently. That broke the tension. Grace laughed again, real this time. This is the weirdest day of my life, she said. Same, I agreed. We sat there for a moment, three strangers who were also siblings, trying to figure out what came next. I don't know if I can forgive him, Grace said finally. Thomas. I don't know if I want to. You don't have to, I said. That's not why we're here. Then why are you here? Because that line in his will, about forgiveness being worth more than the pain, I think he wasn't just talking about you forgiving him. I think he was talking about all of us forgiving each other. Forgiving him, forgiving our mom, forgiving ourselves for being angry or hurt or confused. That's very philosophical, Grace said. I've had a weird week. Fair enough. She looked down at the letters again, running her fingers over Dad's handwriting. Can I keep these? The letters? Of course. They're yours. And... She hesitated. Would it be okay if we did this again? Met up, I mean. I'm not saying we're going to be best friends or anything. But maybe we could get to know each other a little. I'd like that, I said, and I meant it. Me too, David added. Grace nodded slowly. Okay. Okay, let's try this. Family thing. Or whatever this is. Whatever this is, I agreed. Over the next few months, Grace became part of our lives. It was awkward at first. We were all adults with established lives and habits, trying to figure out how to fit each other in. But slowly, carefully, we built something. We met for coffee every few weeks. Sometimes in Riverside, sometimes in Portland, once in Stillwater. We talked about surface things at first, jobs, hobbies, favorite movies. Then, gradually, we went deeper. Grace told us about growing up with just her mom, about feeling different from other kids who had two parents, about the kids at school who called her names when they found out she was from a broken home. I learned to be tough early, she said. Had to be. Mom was working 2 jobs to keep us afloat, and I didn't want to add to her stress by complaining about mean kids or asking questions about my missing father. You must have been angry, David said. All the time. I was angry at him for leaving, angry at my mom for not fighting harder to make him stay, angry at myself for somehow not being enough to make him want to be around. Kids always think it's their fault, I said quietly. Even when it has nothing to do with them. Yeah. Therapy helped with that. Took me years, but I finally understood that his leaving said everything about him and nothing about me. I thought about my own relationship with Dad, the distance, the silence, the feeling that I was never quite what he wanted. He had a hard time with emotions, I said. Any kind of vulnerability made him uncomfortable. I think that's why he ran from your mom. When things got real, when the relationship required actual emotional maturity, he couldn't handle it. So he married your mom instead, Grace said. Someone safer. Someone who wouldn't challenge him. It was harsh but accurate. Mom had spent 43 years managing Dad's emotions, keeping him comfortable, never pushing too hard. Did he ever apologize to you? Grace asked. For being emotionally unavailable? No. He wasn't good at apologies. Or talking about feelings at all, really. At least you got to know him, though. Even if he was complicated. That's true, I admitted. I got something you didn't. That's not fair. Life's not fair, Grace said with a shrug. I've made my peace with that. But I wasn't sure she had. I could see the hurt in her eyes whenever we talked about Dad, the lingering resentment that a lifetime of his letters couldn't quite erase. In December, Grace invited us to her house for Christmas. It was the first holiday we'd spend together as siblings. David and I drove down to Riverside together, both of us nervous. What if this is weird? David asked. It'll definitely be weird, I said. But maybe good weird? Or disaster weird? Always the optimist. Grace's house was a small craftsman bungalow in a quiet neighborhood, decorated for Christmas with lights and a wreath on the door. Her husband Michael answered when we knocked, a tall guy with a friendly smile and an easygoing manner. You must be Lena and David, he said, shaking our hands. Grace has told me so much about you. Come in, come in. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and pine. Grace came out of the kitchen wearing an apron covered in flour. You're here. I'm making cookies. Well, attempting to make cookies. I'm not much of a baker. Neither am I said. We can burn them together. We ended up in the kitchen, the 4 of us decorating sugar cookies that were slightly overdone but edible. Michael told terrible jokes. David told embarrassing stories about me as a kid. Grace shared stories about her nursing job that were equal parts funny and horrifying. It felt normal. Like we'd done this 100 times before instead of this being our first. At some point, Grace pulled out one of Dad's letters. I've been reading these, she said. All of them. Some of them multiple times. How is that? I asked carefully. Hard. Sad. Confusing. But also. She paused. I don't know. It helps, somehow. Knowing he thought about me. Knowing he regretted his choices. It doesn't fix anything, but it makes it a little easier to understand. Do you think you'll ever forgive him? David asked. Grace was quiet for a moment. I don't know. But I'm trying to forgive the version of me that spent so many years angry about it. Does that make sense? Yeah, I said. I think that's what he meant. About forgiveness being worth more than the pain. He wasn't just asking us to forgive him. He was saying we should forgive ourselves for however we feel about this whole mess. Your dad was deeper than I gave him credit for, Michael said. He had his moments, I agreed. Later, after dinner, Grace pulled out a photo album. Mom gave this to me years ago, she said. Pictures of her and my dad, Thomas, from when they were together. We flipped through it slowly. There was young Dad, maybe 28 or 29, laughing in a way I'd never seen. And Sarah, beautiful and vibrant, looking at him like he hung the moon. And baby Grace, held between them, both parents beaming. They looked happy, David said. They were, I think. At least for a while. Grace touched one of the photos. Mom told me after I met you guys that they really did love each other. It just wasn't enough to overcome his fear. Fear of what? I asked. Commitment. Responsibility. Growing up. She said he was still trying to figure out who he was, and a baby forced him to be someone he wasn't ready to be. That's a generous interpretation, David said. Yeah, well. Mom's a generous person. More generous than he deserved, probably. We sat with that for a moment. Have you told her about us? I asked. About meeting us? Yeah. She was shocked at first, then kind of amused. She said it figures that Thomas would find a way to bring us together even after death. That was always his style, indirect communication, making other people figure things out. That sounds like Dad, I said. She wants to meet you sometime, if you're okay with that. No pressure, but she said she'd like to thank you for reaching out to me. We'd love to meet her, I said, and meant it. Because Sarah was part of this story too. She'd been the first woman Dad had loved and abandoned. She'd raised Grace alone, worked multiple jobs, never badmouthed him even though she had every right to. She deserved acknowledgement for that. As the evening wound down and we prepared to leave, Grace walked us to the door. Thank you for coming, she said. This was really nice, actually. Thank you for inviting us, I said. Listen, I've been thinking. Grace fidgeted with the hem of her sweater. About your mom. Eileen. What about her? I know she's had a hard time with all this. Michael said I should try to understand her perspective, that she was protecting her family the only way she knew how. That's generous of you, David said. I'm not saying I'm ready to meet her or anything. But I don't hate her. I understand why she did what she did, even if I don't agree with it. I felt something loosen in my chest. That means a lot, Grace. Really. Tell her that, okay? Tell her I'm not angry at her. I'm just processing. I will. Grace hugged me then, suddenly and fiercely. Then she hugged David too. I'm glad you found me, she said quietly. I'm glad I have siblings now. We're glad too, I said, my voice thick with emotion. On the drive home, David and I were both quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, that went better than I expected. Yeah. She's pretty amazing. We should have known about her our whole lives, David said, anger creeping into his voice. We should have grown up together. Mom and Dad stole that from all three of us. I know. Are you going to forgive them? Mom and Dad? I thought about that. About forgiveness and what it meant. I think forgiveness isn't one big moment, I said slowly. It's a choice you make over and over again. Some days I wake up angry at them for the lies, for the secrets, for the distance. Other days I understand they were just broken people doing the best they could with what they had. That's very mature of you. I'm in therapy too, I admitted. Started going after all this happened. Turns out our family gave me some stuff to work through. David laughed. No kidding. But I think Dad was right about one thing. Holding on to the anger, holding on to the pain, it hurts me more than it hurts them. They're gone, or at least Dad is. And Mom, she's already punished herself more than I ever could. So you're just going to let it go? Not exactly. I'm going to feel what I feel, the anger, the hurt, the confusion, but I'm not going to let it define me. And I'm going to build something better with Grace. That feels like the best way to honor what Dad was trying to say. The truth always hurts, but sometimes forgiveness is worth more than the pain itself, David quoted. Yeah. That. Back in Stillwater, Mom was a shadow of herself. The house felt too big and too empty now that it was just her. She'd started packing up Dad's things, donating most of it, but his workshop remained untouched. She couldn't bring herself to go in there yet. I visited more frequently now, driving down from Portland every couple of weeks. David came less often. He was struggling with his own feelings about everything that had happened, but he called her regularly. One afternoon in January, I found Mom sitting in Dad's workshop, surrounded by his tools and car parts. Mom? You okay? She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I keep thinking he's going to walk through that door, complaining about some part he can't find or telling me about a customer at the store. I sat down next to her on an old wooden stool. I know. I spent so many years being angry at him, Mom said. For Sarah, for Grace, for making me keep that secret. And now he's gone and I'd give anything to have one more fight with him, one more silent dinner, one more chance to say what I should have said years ago. What would you say? That I forgave him. That I understood why he was so broken. That I was sorry too, for making him choose, for forcing him to cut Grace out of his life. We were both wrong, Lena. It wasn't all him. I played my part in this mess. I know you did, Mom. Are you ever going to forgive me? I looked at her, this woman who'd raised me, who'd made countless sacrifices, who'd also made terrible choices that hurt people. She was complex, just like Dad had been. Just like we all were. I'm working on it, I said honestly. Some days are easier than others. That's fair. Grace asked me to tell you something, I said. She said to tell you she's not angry at you. She's processing everything, but she doesn't hate you. Mom's face crumpled. She said that? Yeah. She's a good person, Mom. You and Dad missed out on knowing an incredible woman. I know. Mom wiped her eyes. I know we did. And I'll regret that for the rest of my life. She also said that maybe someday, when she's ready, she might want to meet you. Mom looked at me with something like hope. Really? No promises. But maybe. I don't deserve that. Probably not, I agreed. But that's the thing about forgiveness, it's not about deserving it. It's about choosing to let go of the hurt. Mom was quiet for a long moment. Your father was right, you know. In his will. About forgiveness being worth more than the pain. I think so too. I should have fought harder for all of you to know each other, Mom said. I should have put aside my pride and my hurt and done what was best for you kids. But I was scared and selfish, and I convinced myself I was protecting you when really I was just protecting myself. You were human, Mom. You made mistakes. We all do. Can you? She hesitated. Can you tell Grace I'm sorry? When you see her again? Tell her I'm sorry for taking her father away, for making him choose, for all the years she spent wondering about him. I will. But Mom, maybe you should tell her yourself. When the time is right. If she's willing. I don't know if I could face her. Knowing what I did. That's exactly why you should face her. Because facing the things we're ashamed of, that's the only way to move forward. Mom looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. When did you get so wise? I had a weird year, I said with a small smile. In March, Sarah reached out. She called me out of the blue one evening, introducing herself simply as Grace's mother. I hope you don't mind me calling, she said. Her voice was warm, with a slight rasp like she used to smoke. Grace gave me your number. I wanted to thank you for reaching out to her. Of course. I'm glad we found each other. It was brave, what you did. Most people would have just let sleeping dogs lie. I couldn't do that. Grace is my sister. She deserved to know. Yes, she did. Sarah was quiet for a moment. I should have told her about Thomas years ago. I thought I was protecting her, but really I was just taking the easy way out. You did what you thought was best, I said. Did I though? Or did I just avoid a difficult conversation because I didn't want to deal with my own feelings about him? I didn't have an answer for that. Would you want to meet sometime? Sarah asked. You and David and me? Grace said she'd come too, if that's okay. I'd like to meet the family Tom built after he left us. I'd like that, I said. How about neutral ground? There's a park in Salem, halfway between Stillwater and Portland. We could meet there next Sunday. That works. After we hung up, I sat there thinking about Sarah. This woman who'd loved Dad when he was young, who'd had his child, who'd been abandoned and left to figure it out alone. She'd raised an incredible daughter, built a life for herself, moved on. She had every right to be bitter, to refuse contact with Dad's other family. But instead, she was reaching out. Maybe that was another kind of forgiveness. The meeting in Salem was surreal. It was a clear spring day, the park full of families with kids on the playground, joggers on the paths, dogs fetching tennis balls. We found a picnic table under a big oak tree. Sarah was waiting when we arrived, with Grace beside her. She was probably in her early 60s now, still attractive with streaks of gray in her dark hair. She had Grace's smile, warm and genuine. Lena? David? She stood as we approached. That's us, I said. She looked at us for a long moment, studying our faces. You both look like him, she said finally. Especially you, Lena. You have his eyes. So does Grace, I said. I know. That's what made it so hard sometimes, looking at her and seeing him. We all sat down, awkward at first. Thank you for meeting us, David said. Of course. I've been curious about you two for a long time, actually. I used to see Tom around town sometimes, and I'd wonder about his life. His family. If he was happy. Was he? Grace asked. Happy? Sarah looked at her daughter. I don't know, honey. I hope so. But from what you've told me, it sounds like he carried a lot of regret. He did, I confirmed. He and Mom, they were never really happy together. There was always this distance between them. Because of us, Grace said. Because of the secret, I corrected. Because they built their marriage on a lie and it poisoned everything. Sarah nodded slowly. I never meant to be a problem for him. When I found out I was pregnant, I told Tom he didn't have to be involved if he didn't want to be. I was prepared to raise Grace alone. But he said he wanted to try, wanted to be there. What happened? David asked. He got scared. The closer we got to my due date, the more panicked he became. He started talking about not being ready, about needing more time. And then when Grace was born, Sarah's voice got soft. He came to the hospital. Held her once. And then he left and I never saw him again. Grace reached for her mother's hand. I tried to reach out a few times over the years, Sarah continued. When Grace was little and needed things. But he'd always send money anonymously, never a note, never any acknowledgement that she was his daughter. Eventually I stopped trying. I'm so sorry, I said. For what he did to you. To both of you. It was a long time ago, Sarah said. I've made my peace with it. And honestly, Grace and I did okay on our own. We were a good team. The best team, Grace said, squeezing her mom's hand. But I won't lie, there were times I was angry. Times I wanted to march up to Tom's house and demand he acknowledge his daughter. Times I wanted to tell his wife, blow up his perfect little life. Why didn't you? David asked. Because what would that accomplish? It wouldn't make him love Grace. It would just create more pain for everyone. And I didn't want Grace to grow up knowing her father had been forced to be in her life. She deserved better than that. We sat quietly, watching a family nearby have a birthday party, balloons tied to a picnic table. Can I ask you something? I said to Sarah. Of course. Did you love him? When you were together? Sarah smiled sadly. Very much. Tom he was special. Charming, funny, sweet when he let himself be. I thought we'd have a life together. But he was also terrified of being tied down, of being responsible for other people. When things got real, he ran. He ran from us too, I said. In a different way. He was physically there but emotionally gone. I'm sorry, Sarah said. You deserved better. So did you. So did all of us, Grace added. Another silence, this one more comfortable. I like this, Sarah said suddenly. The four of us, together. Tom would have hated it, having his two families meet, but I like it. Me too, Grace said. It feels. David searched for the word. Complete. Like a circle closing. Yes, I agreed. That's exactly what it feels like. Sarah looked at me thoughtfully. Grace told me your mother is having a hard time with all this. She is. She carries a lot of guilt. I don't blame her for what happened, you know? Tom made his own choices. She was just trying to protect her family. Would you ever want to meet her? I asked. I know that's probably asking too much. I'd be willing, Sarah said, surprising me. If she wanted to. We're all connected now, whether we like it or not. Might as well be civil about it. That's incredibly gracious of you. I've had a lot of years to work through my anger. At some point, you have to decide if you want to keep carrying it around or put it down. There was that theme again. Forgiveness is a choice. A burden you could put down. In May, almost 7 months after Dad's death, we all gathered at the house in Stillwater. It was Mom's idea, actually. She'd called me one night and said, I think it's time. Time to meet them. Sarah and Grace. If they're willing. Are you sure, Mom? No. But I think your father was right. This family has been broken for too long. Maybe we can't fix everything, but we can at least try. So I'd made the calls, sent the texts, made the arrangements. And now we were all here, Mom, David, me, Grace, Michael, and Sarah. Mom had cleaned the house from top to bottom, cooked enough food for an army, and changed her outfit 3 times before they arrived. She was more nervous than I'd ever seen her. When the doorbell rang, she jumped. I'll get it, I said. Grace and Sarah stood on the front porch, both looking as nervous as Mom. Hi, I said. Come in. They stepped inside, and I led them to the living room where Mom was waiting. For a moment, the 2 women just looked at each other, Eileen and Sarah, the 2 women who'd loved the same man, who'd both been hurt by him in different ways. Then Mom stepped forward. I'm Eileen, she said, her voice shaking slightly. Thank you for coming. Sarah. And this is Grace. They shook hands formally, awkwardly. Please, sit, Mom said. I made coffee. And cookies. And probably too much food. I'd love some coffee, Sarah said kindly. We all settled in the living room, this strange collection of people brought together by one complicated man. I don't really know where to start, Mom said, twisting her hands in her lap. But I want to say I'm sorry. To both of you. For my part in keeping you apart from Tom, for making him choose, for... You don't have to apologize, Sarah interrupted gently. You were protecting your family. I understand that. But Grace... I'm okay, Grace said. Really. I'm not going to say it didn't hurt, growing up without a father. But I had my mom, and that was enough. You didn't owe me anything, Mrs. Carter. Call me Eileen. Please. Eileen, Grace repeated. I want you to know I don't blame you. My father made his own choices. He could have fought to be in my life if he'd wanted to. He didn't. Mom's eyes filled with tears. I shouldn't have made him choose, though. I should have been bigger than that. We all did things we regret, Sarah said. I should have insisted he be involved. I should have pushed harder. But I was young and proud, and I didn't want him in Grace's life if he didn't want to be there. You were protecting your daughter, Mom said. That's what mothers do. Yes, Sarah agreed. Sometimes we protect them from the wrong things. Grace cleared her throat. Can I say something? We all looked at her. I've spent the last 7 months learning about my father, meeting my siblings, trying to understand why he did what he did. And what I've realized is that he was just a person. A flawed, complicated, sometimes cowardly person. He made mistakes. Big ones. But he also clearly loved his kids, all 3 of us, even if he didn't know how to show it. She pulled out one of Dad's letters. In this one, he writes about watching me graduate from nursing school. He was there, apparently, in the back of the auditorium. He wrote that he was proud of me. That I'd become everything he'd hoped I'd be, despite him not being around to help. Grace's voice cracked. And that matters to me. It doesn't fix anything, but it matters. He thought about me. He cared. He just didn't know how to show up. He had the same problem with us, David said. Being present but not really there. I think he was just emotionally stunted. Couldn't handle the vulnerability required for real connection. A lot of men of his generation were like that, Sarah said. They were taught to be strong, to provide, but not to feel. Not to be soft. That's no excuse, Mom said sharply. Then softer, but you're right. That was Tom. He showed love by working hard, by paying bills, by fixing things. But the emotional stuff, he couldn't do it. So what do we do now? Grace asked. Where do we go from here? I looked around at this group of people, this strange, cobbled-together family. I think we just keep showing up, I said. We have Sunday dinners, celebrate birthdays, be in each other's lives. We build something new from the wreckage of what was. I'd like that, Grace said. Me too, David added. Mom looked at Sarah. Would that be okay with you? Being part of this family? Sarah smiled. I think it would be healing for all of us. Don't you? Yes, Mom said. I think it would. We spent the afternoon together, slowly relaxing, slowly becoming comfortable with each other. Michael fit right in, cracking jokes and helping in the kitchen. David told stories about growing up in Stillwater. Grace shared nursing horror stories that made us all laugh and cringe. Sarah and Mom found unexpected common ground, talking about teaching, Sarah's profession, and Mom's volunteer work with the library. At one point, I found myself in Dad's workshop with Grace. She was looking at the old Chevy he'd been restoring when he died. This was his baby, I said. He spent years working on it. Never finished it, Grace observed. No. There's a metaphor in there somewhere. Grace laughed. Yeah. Something about unfinished business. She ran her hand along the hood of the truck. Do you think he had any idea what would happen when he left that message in his will? Probably not. He just knew he couldn't die with the secret. That would have been cowardice, even for him. The truth always hurts, but sometimes forgiveness is worth more than the pain itself, Grace quoted. I hated that line when I first heard it. It felt like he was asking too much. And now? Now I think he was telling us that holding on to the hurt would damage us more than letting it go. Not forgiving him, forgiving ourselves for being angry, for feeling betrayed, for all the complicated emotions this has stirred up. That's wise, I said. I'm in therapy, Grace said with a smile. Turns out finding out your dead father watched your life from afar for 36 years brings up some issues. Who knew? We stood there together, two sisters looking at our father's unfinished project. I'm glad he left that message, Grace said finally. As cryptic and frustrating as it was. Because it brought us together. You, me, David, we never would have known each other without it. I'm glad too. Do you think he'd be surprised? By how things turned out? I thought about Dad, stubborn, private, emotionally unavailable Dad, and what he'd think of his two families gathered in his house, breaking bread together, building bridges. I think he'd be shocked, I said. And secretly pleased. And completely unable to admit it. Grace laughed. That sounds like him. At least, from what I've learned. That was definitely him. A year after Dad died, we scattered his ashes. We went to the coast, all of us together. Mom had kept them on the mantel for months, unable to decide what to do with them. But finally, she said it was time. The Oregon coast in October is beautiful and brutal, all gray skies and crashing waves and wind that cuts through you. We stood on the beach at Cannon Rock, passing around the urn, each taking a handful of ashes. Should we say something? David asked. I think we should, Mom said. Tom would hate it, which is exactly why we should do it." We laughed, because that was true. Mom went first. "Tom, you were a complicated man and a difficult husband. But you gave me 2 beautiful children and 43 years of memories, good and bad. I forgive you for your mistakes. I hope you can forgive mine. Rest easy now." She scattered her handful of ashes, and the wind caught them, carrying them toward the ocean. David went next. "Dad, I wish I'd known you better. I wish you'd let me in. But I'm grateful for what you taught me, even if most of those lessons were about what not to do. I hope wherever you are, you've found some peace." Then me. "Dad, you weren't perfect. You hurt people, made terrible choices, lived with too much guilt and not enough courage. But you also gave me a sister I never knew I was missing. And in the end, you did the brave thing, you told the truth. That counts for something. I love you. I forgive you. And I hope you knew, in your last moments, that we'd be okay." My ashes joined the others, dancing on the wind. Then it was Grace's turn. She held the ashes for a long moment, looking out at the ocean. "Thomas Carter," she said finally, "you were my father, even though you never acted like it. You watched my life from a distance, wrote me letters you never sent, thought about me but never had the guts to show up. And I spent a lot of years angry about that." She paused. "But anger is exhausting. And I'm tired of carrying it. So I'm putting it down, right here, right now. I forgive you for not being the father I needed. I forgive you for being human and flawed and scared. And I thank you for bringing me to these people, my brother and sister, my family. That's your redemption, I think. Not the letters or the money or the guilt. This. Us. All of us together." She let the ashes go, and we all watched them disappear into the wind and waves. Sarah came forward then, even though she'd said she didn't want to speak. "I wasn't going to say anything," she said. "But Tom, if you're listening somehow, somewhere, I forgive you too. You broke my heart when you left, and it took me a long time to put it back together. But I built a good life without you. I raised an incredible daughter. And now, because of you being brave enough to tell the truth, I have more family than I ever expected. So thank you. And goodbye." She scattered the last handful of ashes. We stood there on the beach, wind whipping around us, salt spray on our faces, and watched Dad become part of the ocean. "He'd hate this," Mom said again. "All the feelings and the talking and the crying." "Good," Grace said. "He deserves to squirm a little." We laughed through our tears. Life moved on, the way life does. Mom sold the house in Stillwater and moved to a condo in Portland, closer to me and Sarah. She and Sarah became unlikely friends, bonding over their shared history and their love of gardening. David moved in with his girlfriend, finally ready to commit. They got engaged on Christmas, surrounded by family, all of us. Grace and Michael bought a bigger house, talking about starting a family. "You're going to be an aunt," she told me excitedly. "How weird is that?" "So weird," I agreed. "And so wonderful." Emily, my daughter, loved having Aunt Grace in her life. They bonded over crafts and bad movies and a shared love of ice cream. We had Sunday dinners, rotating houses. We celebrated birthdays and holidays. We showed up for each other the way families do. It wasn't perfect. We had disagreements, awkward moments, times when the wounds felt fresh again. Grace had hard days where she grieved the father she never had. David struggled with feeling like he'd never quite belonged anywhere. Mom carried guilt that would never fully leave her. But we kept choosing each other. Kept showing up. Kept doing the work of being family. 2 years after Dad died, on the anniversary of his death, I found myself back at the cemetery. I hadn't been since the funeral. None of us had, really. But I felt pulled there that day. His headstone was simple. Thomas James Carter 1955 to 2023 Beloved Father. It didn't say everything. It didn't capture his complexity, his flaws, his regrets, his small moments of grace. But maybe that was okay. Headstones never tell the whole story. I sat down on the grass next to his grave. "Hi, Dad," I said. "It's me. Lena. I don't know if you can hear me, wherever you are, but I wanted to update you on things." A breeze rustled through the cemetery trees. "Grace is great. You'd like her, or you would have liked her, if you'd given yourself the chance. She's strong and funny and kind, despite everything. She's your daughter in the best ways. And she's found a way to forgive you, I think. Or at least to make peace with who you were." I plucked at the grass. "David's doing well too. He's getting married next year. He talks about you sometimes, not a lot, but sometimes. I think he wishes things had been different between you two." "Me too." A crow landed nearby, watching me with bright black eyes. "Mom's okay. She's lonely sometimes, but she's building a new life. She and Sarah are friends, which is maybe the weirdest outcome of all this. You're two women, bonding over your mistakes. You'd be mortified." I smiled at the thought. "I'm okay too, Dad. It took a while, a lot of therapy, a lot of hard conversations with myself. But I'm okay. I've forgiven you. Not because you deserve it, necessarily, but because I deserve to put down that weight and move forward." The crow flew off, disappearing into the gray sky. "That thing you wrote in your will, about forgiveness being worth more than the pain, you were right. I hated admitting it at first, because you didn't earn the right to be wise at the end. But you were right. Holding on to anger, onto hurt, onto the what-ifs and if-onlys, it was eating me alive. Letting it go, forgiving you and Mom and myself, that's been the hardest thing I've ever done. And the most freeing." I stood up, brushing grass off my jeans. "So thank you, Dad. For being brave enough to tell the truth, even if you did it in the most cryptic, frustrating way possible. For giving me a sister. For teaching me, eventually, about the power of forgiveness." I touched his headstone. "Rest well. We're okay. All of us. We're going to be okay." As I walked back to my car, I felt lighter somehow. Like I'd been carrying Dad's unfinished business and had finally set it down. The truth had hurt. God, it had hurt so much. But forgiveness had been worth it. 5 years after Dad's death, we gathered for Thanksgiving at Grace and Michael's new house. It was chaos in the best way, kids running around, Emily, now 13, and Grace's daughter Lily, 2, adults in the kitchen arguing about the right way to make stuffing, laughter echoing through the rooms. I stood in the doorway watching it all, feeling that familiar ache of bittersweet emotion. "You okay?" Grace appeared at my elbow, carrying Lily on her hip. "Yeah. Just thinking about Dad. Wondering what he'd make of all this." Grace looked around at the scene, David and his wife setting the table, Mom and Sarah laughing about something in the kitchen, Michael teaching Emily how to carve the turkey. "I think he'd be shocked," she said. "But happy. Secretly happy. Definitely secretly. God forbid he actually express an emotion." "That's our Dad," Grace said, and the words felt natural now. "Our Dad. Shared history, shared DNA, shared damage and healing. Aunt Lena. Lily reached her chubby arms toward me. I took her, settling her on my hip. She smelled like baby shampoo and graham crackers. She's beautiful, I told Grace. She is. And she's going to grow up knowing her whole family. No secrets, no half-truths. Just love. That's the best revenge, you know. Against all the lies and secrets. Building something better for the next generation. I like that, Grace said. Revenge by radical honesty. Mom called from the kitchen, girls. Come help with the gravy. Grace and I exchanged a look, when had we become the girls, and headed toward the kitchen. As I passed through the living room, I caught sight of a framed photo on the mantel. It was from last year's Thanksgiving, all of us crowded together, faces pressed close, smiling. Mom, David, me, Grace, Sarah, Michael, Emily. Family in all its complicated, beautiful, messy glory. In the corner of the frame, someone, Grace, probably, had tucked one of Dad's letters. Just the first line was visible. The truth always hurts, but sometimes forgiveness is worth more than the pain itself. I paused, reading those words again. 5 years ago, they'd felt like a riddle. A puzzle I had to solve. Now they felt like wisdom I'd earned the hard way. Dad had been right. The truth had hurt more than I could have imagined. Finding out about Grace, confronting the lies our family was built on, facing the reality of who my father really was, all of it had been excruciating. But forgiveness, forgiving him, forgiving Mom, forgiving myself for all the complicated feelings I'd had, that had been transformative. It didn't erase the pain. It didn't magically fix everything. But it had freed me to build something new. To love these people, flaws and all. To accept that families are messy and imperfect and sometimes broken, but they're also capable of healing if everyone's willing to do the work. Lena. Grace called. Gravy emergency. I laughed and headed toward the kitchen, toward the noise and chaos and love. Behind me, I could almost feel Dad's presence, quiet, watching, finally at peace. We were okay. All of us. Together. And in the end, that was the greatest gift he'd given us. Not his money or his possessions or even his letters. But the gift of truth, and the space to forgive.